Happy No Shave November. And for you podcast listeners out there, you have the privilege of not seeing the disgusting mess on my face that I call a beard. Welcome to Asian Problems. But for real, welcome to Minority Reports. And this November, we're gonna be doing something different. We're gonna be cooking Southern baked mac and cheese. We're getting just a little bit political. And I adapted this recipe from the lovely email over at AfricanBites.com. We have half and half onion powder, panko breadcrumbs, our assorted cheeses, condensed milk, various spices, cavatappi pasta, butter, flour. We also have some raisins. So the first thing that for you non-Southern whites need to do is to grab this box of raisins and toss it like the US Constitution. Believe me, our government does it all the time and it's worked wonders for us. So the real first thing we need to do is to preheat our oven to 350 degrees. And while that's going on, I already got a pot of water. Let's just set it to a boil. For y'all who aren't home cooks out there, it's faster to boil it when there's a lid on top of it. But if you are lazy or energy efficient, as I put it, I like to take a skillet, put it on top of the boiling pot to serve as my lid. Now let's go ahead and butter a pan right quick. And for the viewers out there, I'm holding the pan out to the camera. Well, not the viewers, listeners. Also, if you're listening to a cooking political show, I really do fear what's going on with your life. I appreciate you being here though. A mistake a lot of people make is when they're adding milk to the roux, we're gonna make a roux in a moment, is that they add cold milk to it. But cold milk actually slows down the cooking process by hell a lot. What we're gonna need is to take our half and half and pour out 1/2 cup. So for y'all podcast listeners out there, I poured half and half into a glass container. What am I doing with my life? And we're gonna take our condensed milk. We're gonna shake it like a baby. Just imagine you're Casey Anthony. Yeah, I'm still getting demonetized. I'm gonna go ahead and check on our boiling pot. Just kidding on that. I'm gonna go ahead and put our full can of condensed milk and half cup of half and half into a tall saucepan. The reason why you want it tall is because when you're heating up your milk, there's a very high chance that the foam's gonna rise to the top. Bum, 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 bum. Insert jump cut. All right, something else that we can do, or we're waiting for our save game to load, is to get our assortment of spices together. We want 2 teaspoons of garlic powder. Let's take ourselves a half teaspoon of cayenne pepper. Yeah, and there's not much life in my Creole seasoning container, so I'm just gonna pour the rest of this out and pretend that it's 1 teaspoon. And I know this is odd, but I like to also add a bit of Old Bay seasoning. Oh yeah, and the spices look like this right here. As far as something that I'm most thankful for this Thanksgiving, well, if you can't tell by my Hawaiian print shirt, I am rather happy to be an American. It's not to get too much into it, but there's no understatement that my life would be a lot different if I remained in the Philippines. And don't get me wrong, there's folks there who have a happy life, they're happy enough as is, they're content with it. But what I do appreciate the most about American culture is this endearing American arrogance, this sense of ambition that goes through all of us. From young people who want to become the next great American writer, the next great singer, the next great whatever, astronaut, even the struggle rappers at hometown. I do enjoy the fact that we always aim to reach for the moon. All right, I think we finally got our pot all bubbly. Before we open the bag of the pasta and throw it all in there, I like to make the water taste like the ocean. So I'm just gonna add lots of salt to it. Now we're gonna open our cavatappi pasta, which I could be mispronouncing. My apologies to you Italian viewers and or listener out there. And we're gonna lightly stir this for about 8 minutes. And because it's a season of giving, not to get too sentimental here, but I really enjoy volunteering from time to time. I don't volunteer as much as I want to or ought to, but any time I can squeeze in, it's well worth it. The places that I volunteer locally right here in Central Texas there's the Central Texas Food Bank, where what I really like about the Central Texas Food Bank is that it is client choice. We don't go out there and just hand people just boxes of things that they may not want or even ask for. We also have mobile food pantries to where we deploy to the neighborhoods where there's high food insecurity, and we give each family about 40 or 50 pounds of foodstuffs. And it's not, as I said, it's not too fancy, but for a family that's struggling to make ends meet, it's definitely what's needed. A lot of folks are surprised to hear about how much food security is embedded throughout America. It's not just feeding the homeless. There's retirees living on diminishing pensions. There's folks who have medical bills. Or injuries. There's a lot of things that can happen that can derail a family's standard of living. But at the very least, only for a few hours each mobile food pantry deployment, we can give a family peace of mind for at least a couple weeks where they need not worry about grocery expenses. Another place I'd like to volunteer is Restoration Ranch down in Bastrop, Texas. What I like about Restoration Ranch, it's a veteran-oriented organization, and it's centered around rehabilitating rescue horses. All these horses were destined for slaughterhouses or abused, or the owners no longer need them after an injury, or whatever the story may be. And we take these horses in, care for them, and in turn, these horses care for us. I know when I was going through depression after I was out of the Marines, those horses saved me. But again, let's not get too sentimental here. I just realized I didn't even tell my podcast listeners my name. I'm Chris from Deport. Or maybe I did tell y'all my name, but I just decided to forget. I promise you, I'm not getting old. I'm just scatterbrained. Been that way through my entire life. Yeah, more to harp on the volunteering aspect, if y'all will allow me to rant for a bit, is that a lot of folks have asked me about why are we so polarized in America, about what is behind the resurgence of the alt-right or the threat of Antifa. And I think it all comes from the same place. So while I'm waiting 3 minutes for the macaroni that's supposed to stir to stop boiling, I think we made a wrong turn after the Industrial Revolution to where we uprooted tens of thousands of years of multi-generational agrarian families. And I do say multi-generational. These households are not the nuclear family that my conservative friends like to uphold as a standard. What I believe is a true traditional family is what existed for thousands of years, to where you have grandparents who provide wisdom, the adult parents who provide strength, and the children who provide a reason for it all. And so we became the nuclear family when the adult parents and their children left for the industrial cities to work in the factories. And we are further splintered today when it comes to the service-based economy, to where it's not unheard of. It's actually pretty common to hear people who say, oh yeah, my brother's in this state, my parents are back in this one, my younger siblings on the other side, your family's scattered. I'm not saying that we should return to our clan-based systems. I'm not telling us that we all need to go Amish here. What I'm saying is that we need to recognize what we have lost. Family is our first sense of loyalty and it forms our first basis of identity. And we don't have a strong sense of that. I'm not saying that family is by blood. There's plenty of people out there who can attest to the fact that there's plenty of bloodline, that there's plenty of bad blood between their relatives. But at the very least, you do need a family, even if it's one of your own making. Where I believe we went wrong, this accumulated over time, and this is the fault of this is the failure of secular humanism, for all appreciate it and bring us away from the lockstep of religious orders, is that the void that we have, the spiritual bankruptcy that we have, hasn't been satisfied truly. There's been some poor substitutions, namely political tribes. The danger of political tribes, in my uneducated opinion, or as my friends would say, undegreed opinion, because I'm technically educated, but don't tell me that. It is the danger of political tribes is that the quote-unquote familiar needs, the sense of belonging, is wholly conditional. The moment that you step out of line, politically speaking, or outside of their philosophy, is where you'll be deemed as an outsider, as someone who isn't truly one of us. So that's why you hear folks say, oh, that's just a Republican talking point, or you're sounding like a libtard right now. To where, especially, you see this more pronounced in Facebook groups, to where eventually, quality Facebook groups that have a variety of ideas become more and more homogenous over time, because these people are more concerned about appealing to the majority and being accepted than risk losing it all. And that's what we see in elements of this behind cult personalities, such as folks who followed, there's our mac and cheese. Folks who followed both Obama and Trump, just like I did. But I'm not going to go on that tangent of the errors of falling for a magic politician. But so let's turn down our heat and take our macaroni and put it into our colander. And watch out for steam, because you don't want steam to get into your eyes. Unless it's steam sail, then please fill my eyes with steam sails. And something else that you need to do immediately is to run cold water over your noodles to stop the cooking process. You don't want these noodles to be overcooked, because you're going to throw them into the oven. Boom, our cavatappi pasta. My apologies to you Italians out there that I'm slaughtering y'all's name. But to be fair, y'all were lackluster in World War II, so I'm getting y'all for that. So now what I'm going to do is not grab the skillet like I don't have fear for my life, is we're going to make our roux. So putting the skillet on low heat, I'm going to go ahead and take our butter. Most folks like to have a 1-to-1 ratio of a tablespoon of butter, tablespoon of flour, but being that I'm a fat ass like Chris Christie, I'm go ahead and have myself 3 tablespoons of butter. And you want to divide up the butter like so, because it will melt faster because there's more surface area for the heat to, I guess, melt. Sorry, I'm not a poet today. And I say low heat because you don't want the butter to brown too quickly. And if y'all may indulge me in an alt-right joke, pretend that you're Richard Spencer and the butter's America, so you don't want the browning of America. So you want to get in 2 tablespoons of flour into it. And you could either whisk it in, which is preferred, but I'm just gonna use a rubber spatula because I'm gonna reuse this rubber spatula anyway to mix in the cheeses. And as I was saying earlier, the danger of political tribes, it is more accentuated when you put in more fringe ideologies. So, it's not that fringe ideologies are a danger in itself, it's one that forms the basis of your identity, to where the more fringe you appear, the more secure you are in your sense of belonging, even betrays your true philosophy. That's why people tell themselves, oh, maybe I don't believe this, maybe I've been brainwashed. There's subtle gaslighting when it comes to either the mainstream or the fringe when you have yourself locked in an echo chamber. And that's what's happened to a lot of folks who are part of the not mainstream, but rather publicized alt-rights and Antifa, to where they don't truly have a sense of belonging when it comes to our service sector economy, because our families are scattered everywhere. A lot of them have been disowned by the family members for their viewpoints, or estranged for them at the very least. So a lot of them turn to political tribes. But you might say right now, why didn't it turn to society? Just think about the mainstream vision society is pushing, just to where, for example, in the cities, the tallest monuments aren't to God or nature, it's to soulless corporations. It's to these large, towering corporate buildings that you're not allowed to enter. To where it's as I said, monuments to gold, not God. And there's also a lot of shallow talking points when it comes to mainstream politics. For example, a lot of liberals emphasize universal health care, but what is not getting a well-deserved attention, and you should really check out this amazing woman, Dr. Pamela Wible. Dr. Pamela Wible, she has a couple of TED Talks and a book on the subject called, correct me if I'm wrong here, Pet Goats and Pap Smears. So just to run down Pamela Wible's story, she's a doctor who who came clean about her own suicidal ideation and talked about the epidemic that's facing the medical community. All right, so okay, I'll get back to that. The butter's melted, and I'm gonna add in our tablespoons of flour, 2 tablespoons. To make our roux. Yeah, roux is a fancy French term for cooked butter and flour. Again, not brown butter, because brown folks like me, we destroy the property value. And you want this to cook for at least a couple minutes to get the flour taste out. Oh yeah, as I was saying earlier, there's not a lot of love for the mainstream liberal left, or as my friends would put it, white liberals, is because it's agreed to a lot of them, but it also applies to many conservatives as well, this phenomenon of moral narcissism, to where it's not the results of your actions that make you a good person, it's not your deeds that make you a good person, but it is your intentions, or at the very least declared intentions. So folks who go around saying, oh, I want universal health care, or I want to help the environment, I preserve traditional values, but they fail to uphold these in practice, or if they actually put it to practice, it's rather detrimental on the well-being of others. They say, well, I didn't mean for it to be that way, so I'm still a good person. I find that entire thing to be asinine, to be honest. I believe you're only a good person if you end up helping other people. If you're hurting other people, you're not that much of a good person. All right, now we're gonna slowly add milk to our roux. As I said, warm milk is better because we don't want to slow the cooking process. Oh, right, and now I said earlier with Pamela Weibel, Dr. Pamela Weibel, my apologies, is that there is an epidemic that about, oh, sorry, I'm tripping on my words here. I just don't want to get things wrong. I'm just ad-libbing if y'all haven't noticed. But I declare an epidemic of doctor suicides in this country, to where at the very minimum, we're losing 2 full classes of medical professionals every year due to suicide. But of course, these things aren't published, much like college suicides aren't out in the forefront, because no medical school, just like no college, wants to be known as a suicide school. So all of these are kept under wraps and not talked about too much. And what I'm thankful for is that, don't worry, I promise you this relates, is when I had suicide ideations in the Marine Corps, they had a healthy attitude, at least in intelligence about mental health, to where I wasn't discouraged or looked down as a pussy for needing to seek mental health. In fact, it was encouraged for me to seek mental health. And another fun little tangent, it was the Marine Corps that got me into more into arts. They signed me up for art therapy out of all military branches as a way to cope with my mental disorder. My mental disorder, by the way, is bipolar disorder. I'm not saying that medicine is all hogwash and we need to focus on holistic approaches. I'm saying that they work in tandem, like a unit, like a family, to where they make up for each other's differences. There's no magic pill out there to accept you for as who you are. It took a long time for me to accept myself as someone with bipolar disorder, but it took me just as long to where I find myself not defined solely by my disorder. And how this all goes back to assembly medicine is that how many of us out there are irate with waiting for an hour or an hour and a half at the doctor's office for what amounts to a 15, if you're lucky, for a 10-minute consultation, most of which is taken up by a questionnaire of what's your name, when you were born, blah, 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 to check out boxes. No, I can't imagine any aspiring doctor out there who grew up saying, hey, I want to check out boxes and barely interact with my patients for a living. No, this is killing them, quite literally. And the reason why I said medicine is because hospitals are, not all hospitals, but the mainstream ones, are pushing for doctors to be more efficient, and being more efficient comes at the cost to having a relationship with their patients. And something else that Pamela Weibold talks about is that a lot of people in the medical profession, they are fed this propaganda that they need to be stoic, that they need to look like they have the answers, even they have none. They need to separate themselves into patients with a white lab coats, while their patients are stripped naked of their clothes, their identity on the examination table. Yeah, and don't have this misconception of her. She practices conservative medicine. She is not about this essential oil is gonna cure all your ailments because it's potent. Folks that you see on your Facebook feed from your hometown who try to add you. No, it's not like that. What she's saying is for medicine to return to its roots, where you have a relationship with your patients, to where if you actually take the time to listen to them, there will be a need for fewer emergencies, fewer missed signs of potentially dangerous and life-threatening pain later on. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and lightly stir my milk and root concoction just to break up the skin that formed on top, and we're gonna go ahead and grab our spice concoction and add it to our other concoction. So that's one of the gripes that I understand of it all, to where a lot of folks say, oh, we need universal health care, but what the wise words of Marianne Williamson is that it's really sick care that people are pushing. If our doctors and patients aren't feeling good with the healthcare they have now, the system they have now, how better are they going to feel when all that is free? I'm not saying that's not going to help a lot of people. I don't. But if we recognize the problems now, we can have a better solution tomorrow. And going back to the other topic, again, I'm scatterbrained. Bear with me if you're still listening to this. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and add in a cup of all these cheeses right quick before I try to complete this scattered thought. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and put a cup of mozzarella cheese in here first because, as you know, the whites go first. And then I'm gonna put in a cup of sharp cheddar cheese. Or again, major thanks to Ema of African Bites. If y'all haven't got to cooking, get into cooking with her recipes. And then we're gonna have a cup of Mexican cheese. Mexican cheese isn't Mexican. The authentic Mexican likes to use white cheeses, not our suspiciously yellow cheeses that we have in America. Okay, we're gonna fold that in just so we can get this cheese melted as quickly as possible. While that's melting, let me try to collect my thoughts. Okay, so that's one of the complaints from young people out there who are rather disillusioned with society when it comes to assembly line medicine, commerce, or for example, a lot of folks like to harp on, especially a lot of conservatives like to harp on about the brilliance of capitalism. Don't get me wrong, it's brilliant. It's what got a lot of people out of poverty, but there's a lot of perverse incentives within capitalism. I like to call this vulture capitalism. Perhaps I'm using this term the wrong way. Again, I'm not degreed. I'm a community college dropout, so take that with a grain of rice as much as possible. But there's a lot of dying towns in America. I traveled to a lot of these dying towns when I worked for several campaigns last year. I lost every single campaign I've been in. I'm bad luck. But thing is that these dying towns, their decay is accelerated when a big corporation such as the cancer of the dollar stores present opportunity to the town, ask for tax credits. They price the local grocers out of business, and when corporate calls and says, hey, this town is not profitable, they leave, and the town's left in worse shape than before they arrived. Because even though the local grocers, small businesses have higher prices, they are more likely to contribute to local causes, such as sponsoring local sports teams and troops, holding community events. You don't get that with a corporate store. They're soulless corporations. Their only loyalty is to money, not the community. And this criticism is further accentuated with international corporations. That's why you see the rise of nativist protectionism in both the Bernie Sanders camp and the Trump camp when it came to the 2016 election. There are folks who feel like they're being left behind. It's not that they don't appreciate progress. It's just when the future doesn't include them, they're going to get resentful. So just keep in mind for y'all future politicians out there, especially those who want progress for the sake of progress, don't cause resentment in the people who are already here, people that you have a duty to. Sorry, this is more serious than I intended. I just wanted to have this be lighthearted, just like the raisin jokes, but I guess that's a price I pay for not writing them out beyond the abhorrent nature of people who want to have raisins in even potato salad. I'm sorry. It's just, I'm not trying to be racist, but if I see any of my Caucasoid friends with raisins potato salad or raisins in any dish that where ought not belong in a potluck, I'm committing a hate crime. All right, our cheese is more or less melted. I'm going to take the heat off, and what I'm going to do right before I put everything all together is I'm going to take a large frying pan. I'm actually going to toast my breadcrumbs with a little bit of thyme. Oh, right, thyme. I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of that on there. So for your podcast listeners, I just put panko breadcrumbs onto a steel frying pan on high heat and added thyme to it. Oh, I just realized I didn't tell any of y'all what heat I've done besides the low heat for butter. So I just kept the low heat for the butter and the melted cheeses. I had high heat, of course, for bowling and low heat for the milk. No, I had medium heat for milk because I wasn't paying attention. And I promise you that this relates. Another tangent of mine is that as I put the cheeses away, is that in both the right and the left, the right more so than the left, there is this rather dismissive attitude against the arts. I'm not talking about the liberal art degrees, I'm talking about the fine arts in general. So where when you see budget cuts happen across an average school district, the first target is going to be the arts program. But of course, the liberal response to this is just to provide more funding. But again, it echoes the problem that we have when it comes to more funding for systems that don't quite work, such as assembly line medicine. The problem with our arts, and Camille Paglia, I think I got that name right. She's one of my favorite people to listen to, and she talks about how soulless the arts have become. It's so commercialized to where if there's no, it's like almost a rebellion against what we consider beauty. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that we have to adhere to every tradition out there, but things are cliches for a reason because cliches work. But with the bankruptcy of beauty and meaning is a bankruptcy of the arts. There's a void that we have sorry, I'm tripping over my words here. But to illustrate this fact, Camille Paglia points out to what draws the bigger crowds. Is it a new up-and-coming contemporary artist, or as folks like to erroneously call this, modern artist, but colloquialism, who's holding his exhibit, or a tour of the great artists of the classical Ninja Turtles? Not classical, classic Ninja Turtles. Michelangelo, Machiavelli. No, not Machiavelli, but he's my favorite Ninja Turtle, just letting y'all know. Of course, it's the classics that draw in the bigger crowds. Of course, some folks like to take this as, oh, the public isn't educated about the arts, so they don't know what it is. Or this attitude that, oh, everything is art. But if everything is art, it's the same thing as saying nothing is art. But of course, there's some middle ground here. We can say some things are bad art. But to get back to the point, is that there's a lot of bad art out there to aspire to where if Camille Paglia points this out in one of her books, I think it is her book on, I think it's Persone, or it could be on sex, gender, feminism. No, it wasn't sex, gender, feminism. Okay, either way, in one of her books, they're all great, you should read them, is she points out on how the split between the liberals and the conservatives in the art world started when it came to this piece called Piss Christ. Piss Christ is this quote-unquote art piece to where the quote-unquote artist put urine in a jar and a crucifix in it and sealed the container. But should that really be considered art? Some people like to have this definition that art is what is controversial, what's decisive, what inspires conversation, but this inspired condemnation. This turned people off to the arts. This didn't bring about appreciation. It brought out, it was an abomination. I'm not saying that we can't blaspheme for the sake of blasphemy. I totally support South Park having the uncensored episode for that very reason. I was talking about, but they at least did it for reasons. Their satire had a purpose. And sorry, again, this is the bipolar mind at work. So a related tangent is there's too many conservatives out there who say offensive things for the sake of being offensive without any real meaning behind it. But they like to hide behind the comedy or satire label. But the purpose of comedy is to be funny. I'm not saying that you have to have this really issue-ridden liberal doctrine of never punch down. So for y'all out there who don't know what punching down means in the comedy world, so there's folks who believe that if you have targets in comedy that you punch up, you have to punch against white people, straight people, men, Christians, Westerners, give or take, and avoid poking fun at minorities. But this has the unfortunate implication that minorities cannot receive equal treatment. I just burned the panko. So, we're gonna put on normal panko breadcrumbs. My apologies, this is what happens when you go on a rant. I'm so glad that y'all, viewers and listeners out there, aren't smelling this disaster. But at the very least, let's get our buttered container, our pasta, all up in here, and then our cheeses. Yeah, what bipolar tangent was I on? Something. Oh yeah, about the bankruptcy of the arts. So, the STEM programs, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, they get favored in funding, attention, and praise to the detriment of the arts. Yeah, however, it's not that the arts, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying the arts has equal survival value. It doesn't, but as the cliche goes, it gives value to survival. The arts, at least what I learned from the Marine Corps, is a reflection of the human condition, a way to turn our pain, our suffering, and convert it into something of beauty. There is something empowering about that. But if you have art without meaning, for example, contemporary artists who have art without pain, yeah, and okay, again, bipolar tangent here. This is the reason why a lot of folks, myself included, absolutely hate Uncle Tom's Cabin. Uncle Tom's Cabin was written by Harry Beecher Stowe, a white woman who has never had the experiences of a black slave. So to me, that just rubs me the wrong way when you are using your platform of privilege to speak for marginalized voices. Marginalized voices who can speak well on their own. And that is also my criticism of, and this is not just a criticism of white writers back then, there's also Phyllis Wheatley. Phyllis Wheatley was originally bought as a slave, but the white family bought her, liked her well enough to treat her as a daughter in their own rights. Even to the point to where when Phyllis Wheatley got sick, the doctor recommended that sea air would help her overcome her ailments. So this very wealthy family back then decided to book her a cruise. And what rubbed Phyllis Wheatley the wrong way, to conclude this tangent of tangents, is that she wrote about the slave experience, but didn't write about the suffering, just kind of overshadowed it. To where even Thomas Jefferson criticized Phyllis Wheatley. Thomas Jefferson, the slave owner, because again, history is not this black and white thing of obvious good guys, obvious bad guys. There's lots of flawed, dynamic characters throughout history. But I'm going to stop that tangent over there because I'm a history nerd. And returning to the main tangent before we go on to the other tangent is my criticism of Sylvia Plath, especially in one of her poems that's an ode to her father, where she compares herself to a Jew while her father was a Nazi, but Sylvia Plath never was in the Holocaust. So again, that rubs me the wrong way when people are appropriating pain of others for their arts. Okay, we're going to spread in regular panko breadcrumbs over this, as I said, because I got too deep into my tangents. And the reason why we have panko breadcrumbs is because it gives a nice crunchy texture to an otherwise smooth and chewy macaroni and cheese. Okay. Balls. So, I can't take out those breadcrumbs, but I will take the cheeses back out. Because again, scatterbrain. All right. So before that, I forgot the most important step. We need to put in layers and layers of cheesy goodness onto our mac and cheese. So we're going to have our layer of mozzarella. And can I return to, the tangent of the arts. So that's what a criticism that I have not all conservatives, but mainstream conservatives see the arts as something pretty but ultimately useless, which isn't the case when it comes to the fact that every culture in human history has arts as a fundamental part of their culture. And my criticism of liberals to where they are taking baby steps onto the right path to where it deserves better treatment, but the process itself needs to be changed as well. Half a solution is still 100% wrong when it comes to grading. Unless you have those professors who are generous enough to give you partial credits. But those are far and few in between. Be thankful for them if you have them. And this criticism of the arts for mainstream conservatives gets extended to criticism of the college system in general. Is to say that they are anti-education, but they are anti the elitist implications of education. And there's some fairly leftist criticisms of the higher education system too, where the society likes to purport this idea that, education is a way to secure gainful employment, when many college graduates don't get gainful employment. There used to be programs at many colleges to where, like trade schools, they assist in job placement, but not so much anymore. You're pretty much on your own there. But you're not on your own when it comes to those so lovely letters asking for your donations when you haven't even secured a job in your field. Oh, right. I'm going to take these oven mitts back off and sprinkle my panko breadcrumbs over all my layers of cheeses. So again, we're getting double crunchy goodness. And oh my goodness, those panko breadcrumbs at the bottom are going to be soggy, but it's fine. It's fine. And then we'll put that in the oven for 20 minutes. And as I said before, the oven is preheated to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, just in case I have the odd European listener out there. Okay, while that's baking, I'm not going to keep you on here for another 20 minutes. I'm going to try to conclude all of my scattered thoughts. So how should I put it? Okay, so the alienation from society that a lot of young people feel, to where they're scattered from their families, estranged from their families, they're locked in political tribes, to where the most extreme views get heard for political purity points, such as, you're not a real liberal, you're not a real progressive, you're not a real conservative, you're not a real libertarian. And so the echoes are the only screams they can hear. And there's a lot of dissatisfaction in that, as well as the shallow talking points of people talking about how things were back in their day through the nostalgia filter, but things never really were like that. But as much as we need to return to, for those out there who are confused as to my position on traditionalism versus progress, is that they shouldn't be seen as competing opposites, but rather as complementary. To where you need tradition to have a stable ground, but you need progress to reach for the skies. But there's no sacred cow. Everything needs to be critically examined. To have tradition for the sake of tradition is just as foolish a notion as progress for the sake of progress. Just to have a more everyday version of this is whenever you get a new boss at work who just wants to shake things up. No one likes that. Or if you have that boss at work who never makes changes to the company, never makes much needed changes to the company, make a more productive workplace, no one likes that either. Whether it's stagnation or erratic instability, it will lead to failure in both families, the workplace, society at large. And to the credit of both Antifa, despite the fact they doxed me, I've learned to be more sympathetic towards them, just as I am sympathetic, believe it or not, towards members of the alt-right. As long as they cross the region to violence and know saying mean words is not violence. Is that those fringe ideologies, they were not born with those ideologies. It's like an act of desperation. They were forced to choose in what they view as a decaying society. And when the rot is eroding the ground they walk on, they're going to try to go on to what they believe is the most worthy option. Whether it is this, they're both real idealistic notions when you break it down. To where the true left, I'm not talking about those, the true communists who want stateless societies and people to naturally have communes, they cannot have that indefinitely forever. There are, indefinitely forever, oh my God, my English today, is that the people who have this notion, they don't think of the longevity of this. So let's have this thought experiment. If you want to believe in stateless societies, how can you maintain stateless societies among hundreds of former nations, thousands of cultures, and billions of people? Eventually, there will be concentrations of power. What a lot of people don't like to admit is biological truths. The biological truth is that we are pack animals. We are followers. We're a social species. It's more comforting for us to follow a leader than to form our own thoughts, at least for most personalities. This isn't to say that most people are hopeless. It's just that it's a bigger hurdle to come across. It's like me with my bipolar disorder. It's not to say that it's impossible for me to get a control of my emotions. It's just a lot more difficult, but it doesn't make it any less a worthy endeavor. So we have this dissatisfaction of what they perceive as decaying society. Whether you agree or disagree with them doesn't matter to them. Perception for many people is reality. And to just denigrate them as mindless mobs or incels or whatever is just making that self-fulfilling prophecy all the more true. To where you're pushing these people away and cementing their outsider status, to where they feel validated that the society that they're rebelling against abhorrently rejects them. That is no different from Branch Davidians saying, oh, this is the doomsday I was talking about because we're surrounded by the ATF. Also, remember Waco for the ATF supporters out there. It's just that, I guess it kind of eats at me personally, not to get too sentimental here, that these problems are so obvious to me as a crazy guy, but some folks don't want to admit that the best solution to our human problems is to treat it as a human problem. To say, oh, they're anarcho-communists or I need to finish this other tangent. So I criticize the stateless communist belief of having a world free of states and centers and institutions of power, but I'm also going to criticize the alt-right's belief that that being centered around your race, although I do agree logically that ethnostates, at least on paper, are going to be more cohesive than states that have racial divisions when it comes to stability and lowering the cases of otherism, is the fact that a lot of people, even within our community, admit that their own blood, their own family has denounced them or outright disowned them for their own beliefs, or even long before they came to alt-right, they came from a broken home. So it just begs the question of, if you really believe you form a sense of solidarity around something that you can help, such as race, but you also admit that your own blood has betrayed you, what are you really fighting for? You're just fighting for this magic concept, just like a magic pill or a magic politician or the magic race that will make life better for all. It's not going to. Sorry for black pill and all y'all out there. But there is a hope spot. The hope spot is that if a crazy guy like me can recognize these problems, and we can start at least the baby steps of rehabilitating these people before they become desperate and become agents of revenge against society. Because that's what, my goodness, I'm sorry for just ranting on about this. This is supposed to be a comedic episode. But it's just a notion that we as a society, we push people away who don't fit in our mold and say, oh, they're not of us, which is fine to say because what defines what is also defined by what it is not. Opposites define each other. But to go further and to say, oh, they're never one of us to begin with, they're not even human, we'll just call them monsters from this point, is to ignore the problem for what it is. Either there's something wrong with the message or the messengers or both. We cannot wash hands clean completely of complicity, of being complicit in this phenomenon. I really hope I've tied up all my loose ends. If not, you can hammer it out in the comment section below. Yeah. To summarize my erratic tangents going in a million different directions, covering different topics and genres, is that I'm channeling the wisdom of Marianne Williamson, is that the solution of what can heal this human disconnection is a human reconnection. If we can integrate these people in society before they ever feel alienated, if we can address their very valid criticisms, such as, just to summarize, of folks who are disillusioned by this concept of capitalism being this god that we cannot criticize, but seeing their own towns being corrupted and eroded by multi-level marketing schemes, payday loan sharks, rent centers, the state lottery. That's an abomination. They target poor people to where the perverse incentive of profit to where they profit off of someone else's misfortune. That is not the productive capitalism that we need in our culture. Is the free exchange that we need is for both parties to leave better as the end result, not cheated out, such as the small towns that get consumed by the dollar stores, and then shunned out, and then the corporate says this town is not working for us. We're going to leave this town with nothing after we kill their local grocers. Our folks are disillusioned with this rather shallow, moral narcissism, this shallow claim of moral upsetting and moral character when you're actually not doing anything. For example, a lot of folks like to say, oh, I'm such an environmentalist because I am supporting some little girl who doesn't know how to talk to an audience and convince people to cross the aisle to join her side. They're no different from activists who say, oh, I'm just raising awareness. But if everyone's already aware of this issue, then you're not contributing anything meaningful. You're just adding to the pile of rubbish that we have to go through to find diamonds, if there are diamonds to be found in this very divisive debate. But at least for a hope spot is that as divided as a lot of people have become, from what we see on social media, where we have groups banning each other or people being demonetized or deplatformed, is that this dialogue is one of the most, at least in my short 26 years of existence, is far more engaged than before the Trump's presidency, to where we had people who were apolitical and now they're actually reading about politics. Granted, they're not reading the right places if all they're doing is following Trump's tweets, but again, baby steps. We're about celebrating little baby steps today. But they will learn a lesson sooner or later about the dangers of echo chambers. hopefully they leave before there's any permanent damage to their psyche or their sense of belonging. And if we just realize, again, a lot of cliches inbound, is that the other side isn't all that different. It's just a matter of perspective. Understand the country, understand the city folk, understand how someone's raised, whether they grew up in a strict religious household or not. Heck, just, oh my goodness, I'm getting sentimental here. When I went through Marine Corps basic training, I went in knowing that I was going to be spending 3 months with a good number of men who have never seen or who have never seen in person an out and proud gay guy before. Of course, I could have gone my rather juvenile, militant route. I used to be a huge social justice warrior in high school, so please make memes of that if you want. But that route doesn't work. Pleasing people for their language or for saying harmless jokes doesn't make people respect you. Respect, at least in my undegreed opinion, is earned through equal work, not through demanding it, but for living it. So I demand all these guys to not call me, I don't want to get banned by Facebook, bundle of sticks. Because I'll even call them bundle sticks right back. I just didn't care. But guys who went through basic training calling me, I'll just say it, guys who started out basic training calling me a faggot and ended up calling me brother. And that is not earned through militancy. It's not earned through, that respect is not earned through believing that your outrage is activism. It's not. Perpetual outrage just leads to a self-inflicted disease. What you want is reconciliation, a reconnection with these people. Show them that you're not so different. Demonstrate that. But there's a lot of soapboxes today. I promise you, I'll make a joke as soon as I get this mac and cheese out of this right here oven. And speaking of mac and cheese, because you talk about food for a little bit, is that mac and cheese is a good enough meal on its own. But if you need some greens in there, please serve it with separate vegetables. I've seen this one cooking show where, again, I don't want to be racist, but yes, in case you're asking, they were whites, to where they made this delicious mac and cheese well on its own, and they say, oh, now we're gonna add some vegetables to it. My colored heart. I couldn't stomach that. How could you do that to my boy? Look what they did to my poor boy. They massacred him. All right, that was a light comic enough relief. I'm just trying to see if I have rambled on enough to answer most of the questions. Okay, so this vague stuff about reconciliation. Just a small tangent of this has to do with our design of cities. We like to hold cities as the irony of cities is that they are concentrated population centers, but people still feel isolated in them. And when you see the design of cities, at least I can only speak for American cities in my experience. I don't know how European cities are stacked. But in American cities, there's lots of dead-end streets. There's deserts or parking lots in front of generic plazas, strip malls, to where, again, there's lifeless streets. There's this, I like to call it, even though my camera guy would make fun of me for acclimating to suburban hell, I still call it suburban hell because it's not here per se, but at other suburbs that I've been through, there's a lot of people who don't even know who their neighbors are. Here is a lot different because all their kids go to the same school, so they interact that way. But what's the point of living in units next to each other for at least a good chunk of America if you're not going to even be friends with your neighbors? So, just summarize, our families are scattered everywhere to the service-based economy. We live in little boxes and not interact with people who live in the other ticky-tacky. Weeds reference for those of y'all who are out there. And this propaganda of all these things to uphold as great and star-spangled awesome, to where criticism is snuffed out and are fed to the fringe ideologies who are the only ones willing to listen to these people. But again, that's the hope. Our problem, the first step to solving a problem is admitting that we have one. I really wish I timed that well enough. We have 2 minutes left on the baking to where I want to time that with the beeping of the mac and cheese to say, so it can all come together, as Americans, just like all these ingredients come together as mac and cheese. But I'm not one for time. I'm on colored people's time, which is why my follow-up episodes are going to take a lot much longer to do. My apologies to those who have emailed me and messaged me. Come on, what else can I ramble on for a minute and a half? Whew. Hopefully I can just do a cut. Yeah, I didn't intend for this episode to be as serious, I know, broken record, to be as serious as it came out to be. I didn't plan this at all. And if y'all, for some strange reason, like me being semi-serious about things, then I guess it's a happy accident like my birth. Okay, I'm mostly kidding. I was an accident. My parents tell me I'm planned. But if I was an accident, I wouldn't know the difference anyway. 5. Okay, apparently I counted too quickly. I don't have a good relationship with time. And we have our baked macaroni and cheese. Holding this up for our viewers, you listeners, just imagine what it looks like to where there's crumbled breadcrumb goodness over melted cheesy goodness over boiled pasta goodness. Well, now baked pasta. So hopefully I got this in the shot because I can't see what's going on. Ooh, look at all that melted cheese. Sorry that my elbow got in the shot. Melted cheesy goodness. Normally I will wait for this to cool, but I am reckless, just like our U.S. foreign policy. Thank you kindly for watching. This is Chris from the Minority Deport, and from us, well, us in spirit. Have a happy Thanksgiving. Deport yourself to a better life. And Jeffrey Epstein did not kill himself.